The storm tore across the jagged cliffs of the small planet, shaking the trees and rattling the rocks. Rain fell in thick sheets, turning the ground into mud and making every step treacherous. Evan Kale, a human explorer far from home, struggled to keep his footing. He had been sent to chart this remote world for its resources, but tonight, survival was his only goal. Lightning cracked the sky, and thunder shook the valley below, making his heart pound faster. As he stumbled along a narrow path, a strange sound caught his ear, a soft, frightened cry that did not belong to the wind or rain. Evan froze. The cry came again, higher-pitched and desperate. He scanned the rocky landscape, squinting through the sheets of rain, until he spotted a small nest tucked into a narrow cliffside. Inside were 3 tiny creatures, no bigger than a human child, shaking and huddling together. They were dragon babies, their scales slick with rain, their eyes wide and full of fear. One of them lifted a tiny wing as if to reach for him, and Evan's heart skipped a beat. He had heard stories of dragons, of course, but he had never seen one in real life. And certainly never so small, so vulnerable. The baby's cries grew louder as a shadow passed over the nest. Evan looked up and saw the dark outline of a huge dragon circling above, wings spread wide against the stormy sky. It was their mother, or perhaps something worse, he wasn't sure. Fear prickled his skin, but he did not run. Something deep inside told him these babies needed help, and no matter the danger, he could not leave them. He moved carefully along the wet rocks, sliding sometimes, until he reached the cliffside. The nest was rough, made of sticks and leaves, and soaked through. The babies looked at him with eyes so trusting and full of need that Evan felt a strange, immediate bond with them. He reached a hand forward, and one of the little dragons, the smallest and trembling the most, nudged against his fingers. Its scales were blue like the night sky, and its tiny tail flicked nervously. Evan whispered softly, though he doubted the sound could reach over the storm. "I won't hurt you. I'm here to help." The other 2 dragons in the nest stirred, their cries softening as they sensed his gentleness. He knew he had to act fast. The storm was too strong for the little creatures to survive alone. Carefully, he lifted the babies, one by one, cradling them against his chest. Their warmth seeped into his coat, tiny hearts beating fast and anxious against his own. The largest of the 3, scales red like fire, nuzzled his shoulder as if saying, "Please, don't let us die." Evan scanned the sky again. The large dragon above had vanished, leaving only the roar of wind and rain. Still, he had no time to relax. He had to get the babies to safety. He knew of an abandoned cave a short distance away, one he had passed earlier while mapping the area. It wasn't much, but it would keep them out of the storm for a few hours. The journey to the cave was slow and dangerous. Rocks slipped beneath his boots, and the rain made the paths slick. Several times he stumbled, almost dropping a baby, but each time he caught them, murmuring words of reassurance. "Hold on, little ones. We'll be safe soon. I promise." When he finally reached the cave, he set the babies down on a bed of dry leaves he gathered from the nearby forest. They huddled together, shivering and exhausted, but they did not cry. Instead, they looked up at him with wide, trusting eyes, and Evan felt a strange, overwhelming sense of responsibility. These little dragons depended on him completely, and for the first time in his life, he felt the weight of being someone's family, even if it was in a way he could never have imagined. He examined them carefully. The blue one he named Glint because its scales sparkled faintly even in the dim cave light. The red one became Fira, for the tiny flicker of fire it seemed to carry within, and the smallest, trembling green one, Morrow, for the mysterious, quiet strength he thought it might grow into. As Evan worked, he realized the storm had not yet passed. The cave echoed with the sound of rain hammering against rocks, and every crack of thunder made the babies flinch. He stayed close, whispering and moving slowly, feeding them scraps of food he had in his pack. It wasn't much, but it was enough for now. Hours passed. The storm eventually eased, leaving a misty, gray calm over the cliffs. Outside, Evan could see the first faint light of dawn breaking over the horizon. He leaned back against the cave wall, exhausted, but a strange smile touched his lips. For all the danger and uncertainty, he felt something he had never felt on any of his previous missions: connection. These creatures, though small and fragile, had trusted him completely. And he had chosen to stay, even when leaving would have been safer. Yet a thought nagged at him. Somewhere out there, across the galaxy, the mother dragon waited. And she would be powerful, far stronger than he could imagine. What would she think of a human taking care of her children? Would she see him as a threat or as someone worthy of trust? Evan did not know, but he could not let fear stop him now. The babies were his responsibility, and he would protect them, no matter what challenges lay ahead. As the morning sun pierced the mist, Glint, Fira, and Morrow nuzzled closer to Evan. Their tiny claws rested on his arm, and their heads tilted as if asking a question only he could answer. And Evan, looking into their innocent, trusting eyes, made a quiet promise to himself and to them: I will stay. I will not leave. Not now, not ever. It was a decision that would change his life, and the fate of these dragons, forever. Evan woke to the soft sounds of tiny claws tapping on the cave floor. Glint, Fira, and Morrow were awake, stretching their small wings and blinking at the dim morning light. The storm from last night had passed, leaving the cliffs slick but quiet. Evan rubbed his eyes and smiled at the little dragons. They were stronger today, braver, and somehow more alive. Even in the short hours since he had found them, they had grown in ways that made him proud. He fed them a small breakfast of dried meat and fruit he had packed. Glint pecked carefully at the food, Fira snapped at pieces with eager teeth, and Morrow, the shyest, nibbled at the edge, glancing up at Evan as if asking permission. Evan chuckled. Eat, little ones. You need your strength. As they ate, he studied them. Their scales glimmered faintly in the morning light, blue, red, and green, and their eyes held intelligence beyond their tiny size. These were not ordinary creatures. He realized that the stories he had heard of dragons, the legends of their power and wisdom, might not have been exaggerations at all. After breakfast, Evan decided it was time to teach the dragons how to survive outside the cave. The cliffs were steep and dangerous, but they needed practice. He led them to a small clearing where the grass grew thick and soft. All right, he said, crouching down, let's see what you've got. Glint was the first to try. The little blue dragon flapped its wings tentatively and lifted off the ground for a few seconds before landing in a heap. Evan clapped his hands. Good job. Again, Glint. He helped Fira next, guiding her tiny claws as she struggled to take off. Fira squealed but managed to hover for a short moment before tumbling forward. Morrow, ever cautious, stayed close to Evan's side, watching the others carefully. Evan knelt down and whispered encouragement, stroking Morrow's small head. You'll fly too, I promise. We just need time. They spent the morning practicing flying and climbing small rocks. Evan realized it was not just about teaching them movement, it was about trust. The dragons learned to listen to him, to sense his intentions, and to trust that he would keep them safe. And Evan, in turn, learned to understand their small gestures, the flick of a tail, the tilt of a head, the way their eyes followed him. It was a language without words, but it spoke louder than anything else. By midday, the dragons were exhausted but happy. They curled together in the sun, wings folded, breathing softly. Evan sat nearby, catching his own breath, watching them with wonder. He had spent years exploring planets, mapping terrain, and cataloging creatures, but nothing had ever felt like this. This was more than survival, it was family. The peaceful moment did not last long. A distant roar echoed across the cliffs, deep and powerful. The dragons lifted their heads, ears twitching, wings lifting slightly. Evan's stomach tightened. The sound came again, closer this time. He realized it was not the wind or the storm, it was another dragon. Perhaps their mother had sensed her babies. Perhaps she was coming to reclaim them. Evan's heart pounded. He had prepared for danger, but he had not thought about this. The dragons, surprisingly, did not panic. Instead, they stayed close to Evan, their small bodies brushing against his legs. It was as if they were saying, "We trust you. We will stay with you." The trust filled Evan with both pride and fear. Pride because the bond they shared was real. Fear because he knew the dangers that lay ahead. If a powerful adult dragon arrived, could he protect these tiny creatures? He did not know. But he would try. He could not abandon them now. Evan spent the next few days teaching the dragons more than just flying. He taught them how to hide from predators, how to sense danger, and even how to communicate with him in small ways. Glint learned to flap its wings to signal excitement, Fira learned to growl softly to warn of approaching danger, and Morrow, timid at first, began to nudge Evan's hand when hungry or scared. Every small step amazed him. He could see the intelligence growing in them, the understanding that came not just from instinct, but from learning and observation. During one afternoon, Evan noticed something unusual. The dragons seemed to mimic him in small ways, stretching when he stretched, tilting their heads when he did, even pausing when he paused. It was uncanny, and it made him laugh softly. "You're paying attention, aren't you?" he asked. The dragons chirped and squeaked, as if in reply. Evan realized that the bond between human and dragon was deeper than he had imagined. They were learning from him, but he was also learning from them. Every moment with them reshaped how he saw the world. Word of the dragons spread quietly among the few settlers on the planet. Some were amazed, others fearful. They warned Evan that dragons were too dangerous to raise, that he would be lucky to survive if an adult dragon appeared. Evan listened politely but did not waver. He had made a choice, and he would honor it. The dragons were not toys or weapons, they were lives he had vowed to protect. One night, as Evan lay near the sleeping dragons, he thought about the future. He knew their mother, a powerful queen across the stars, might come for them one day. He knew other dangers existed in the galaxy, hunters, patrols, and even natural predators far stronger than he could handle. But he also knew something else. The dragons had chosen him, just as he had chosen them. The bond they shared was stronger than fear, stronger than storms or threats. It was built on trust, care, and the simple act of staying. Glint, Fira, and Morrow curled close, their tiny bodies warm against his chest. Evan whispered softly, "We'll face it together. No matter what comes, we stay together." The dragons responded with small chirps, their eyes closing in comfort. For a moment, the world outside the cave, the storms, the dangers, the unknown, faded. There was only the small family they had built. Evan realized then that he had changed. He had always seen himself as a lone explorer, a traveler of the stars. Now, he was something more, a protector, a teacher, and a friend. And the dragons, though small and young, were teaching him something in return: how to care, how to trust, and how to be a family, even when the odds were stacked against him. The cliffs outside were quiet under the fading sunlight, but Evan knew the galaxy beyond would not stay quiet for long. Yet he felt ready. For now, he had Glint, Fira, and Morrow. And that was enough to face whatever came next. Together, they would grow stronger, together they would survive, and together they would face the challenges the galaxy would throw at them. The sun rose over the cliffs, casting long shadows across the small clearing where Evan and the dragon babies had spent another night. Glint, Fira, and Morrow stretched their wings in the morning light, practicing short flights that grew longer with each attempt. Evan watched them closely, pride swelling in his chest. They were learning fast, growing stronger every day. But today felt different. A strange hum filled the air, low and steady, almost like the vibration of the planet itself. Evan frowned, scanning the cliffs and the sky. It was not a storm. Something else had arrived. Curious and cautious, Evan led the dragons toward the source of the hum. As they moved closer to a rocky ridge, the ground began to glow faintly, lines of light pulsing beneath the soil. The dragons paused, tails flicking nervously. Evan's pulse quickened. "Stay close," he whispered. The light coalesced into a small device buried among the rocks, a beacon of alien design, sleek and strange, unlike anything he had seen before. He knelt down to examine it, and the moment his fingers brushed the surface, a beam shot upward into the sky, straight and bright. The dragon babies gasped and squeaked, wings lifting as they felt the sudden energy surge. Evan's heart pounded. Whatever he had triggered, it was a signal, and far away, someone or something had received it. Within moments, he noticed shadows moving in the sky above him. A fleet of enormous ships appeared, their surfaces gleaming in the sun. The ships were massive, far larger than any human technology he had encountered, and their shapes were unfamiliar, sleek with glowing edges. Evan's stomach sank. These were not ordinary visitors. They were dragons too, but far different, powerful and regal, moving with precision across the clouds. Then, one ship descended closer, and Evan could see the creature inside. Its scales shimmered like molten metal, wings spread wide, and eyes like molten gold fixed on the nest where the babies had been. This had to be their mother. Her presence was awe-inspiring and terrifying. She was no ordinary dragon, she radiated power, intelligence, and command. The sight froze Evan in place, every instinct telling him to run, but he could not leave the babies. Not now. Not ever. The dragon babies reacted immediately. Glint chirped and flapped, Fira growled softly, and Morrow huddled close to Evan, shaking. Their small voices carried across the clearing, desperate, pleading. Evan reached out, placing his hands on the ground to calm them. "It's okay," he murmured. "I won't let anything happen to you." The mother dragon landed gracefully, shaking the earth beneath them with her massive weight. She lowered her head, golden eyes studying Evan and the babies. For a moment, there was silence, the air thick with tension. Evan realized that communication would be difficult. He could not speak dragon, and she did not speak human. Yet, somehow, he sensed she understood the care he had given her offspring. He held out his hands, palms open, showing he meant no harm. The babies, sensing his courage, nestled closer to him. The mother dragon tilted her head, scanning the small group. A low, rumbling sound echoed from her chest, neither threatening nor welcoming, but it carried authority. She had come to take her children back, but something in Evan's presence made her hesitate. The next hours were a delicate balance. Evan fed the babies, keeping them calm while the mother observed from a short distance. He realized that these dragons were not just powerful, they were rulers of their kind. Their intelligence surpassed anything humans had known. Yet even in her authority, the mother showed a flicker of curiosity toward Evan. She watched how he handled the babies, how he comforted Morrow when it shivered, how he encouraged Glint to flap its wings. She saw care, not control. She saw trust, not fear. And slowly, something shifted. Evan knew he could not keep the babies forever without consequences. He understood the larger galaxy, the powers that moved among stars, fleets, and dragon rulers. But for now, the mother dragon allowed the temporary peace. Evan took the opportunity to learn. He studied her movements, the way she communicated with the babies through subtle gestures and sounds, and he learned more about dragon behavior in hours than he could have in years alone. He realized that humans were capable of understanding and teaching dragons, even while dragons remained creatures of immense power. At one point, the mother dragon stretched her massive wings, preparing to leave. Evan's heart sank. He did not know if she would allow him to keep the babies at all. But the dragon stopped, lifting her head to glance back at him. There was a moment, a silent acknowledgement that the bond between human and dragons was not to be ignored. She had power, yes, but she also recognized the care and loyalty Evan had shown. Perhaps in another life, she would have considered him an intruder. But for now, she was curious, cautious, and maybe even respectful. As the mother ascended, Evan realized the galaxy was far more complex than he had imagined. The humans were small, fragile, and underestimated, yet even they could teach, influence, and care in ways that dragons, rulers of their kind, could notice. The signal he had accidentally sent would have consequences, though. Far beyond the cliffs, fleets, and dragons would soon learn of this human who stayed with their kind. Some might see him as a threat, others as an anomaly. But Evan understood one truth clearly: the babies trusted him, and he would not fail them. The dragon babies chirped and squeaked after their mother's departure, circling around Evan as if asking questions. He laughed softly, exhaustion mixing with relief. "We'll be ready," he told them. "No matter what comes, we face it together." Glint flapped happily, Fira hissed softly in agreement, and Morrow nuzzled against his chest. The bond was stronger than fear or storms. It was built on trust, love, and choice. As night fell, Evan sat outside the cave, watching the stars glimmer above. The galaxy was vast, filled with dangers, rulers, and creatures far more powerful than himself. Yet he felt ready. He had learned that humans were not just small and weak, they were capable of care, courage, and loyalty that could reach even the stars. Glint, Fira, and Morrow rested nearby, their small bodies warm and safe. For now, the immediate danger had passed, but Evan knew this was only the beginning. The galaxy was watching. Powerful dragons, fleets, and rulers would come to learn of the human who stayed with their young. Some might challenge him, some might seek to reclaim the babies. Yet Evan did not fear. He had proven that humans could teach, protect, and love in ways that even the strongest dragons could respect. And that knowledge gave him strength. He whispered to the sleeping babies, "We're ready. Whatever the galaxy brings, we stay together." They chirped softly in response, and Evan smiled. The night was quiet now, but tomorrow, the universe would begin to reveal its secrets, and he would face them with Glint, Fira, and Morrow at his side. Together, they had survived storms, danger, and the unknown. And together, they would face the galaxy. The morning sun barely lit the cliffs when a distant rumble shook the ground. Evan looked up and froze. In the sky, massive ships appeared, their shapes sleek and alien, glowing faintly in the sunlight. The hum of engines vibrated through the rock beneath his feet. He knew immediately what it meant: the galaxy had come for the dragon babies. His heart pounded, but he did not panic. Glint, Fira, and Morrow stirred beside him, sensing the approaching danger. They chirped and squeaked nervously, wings flaring. Evan knelt and whispered to them, "Stay close. We can do this together." The ships descended slowly, casting enormous shadows across the cliffs. The largest among them opened a hatch, and from it stepped dragon-like beings, taller and stronger than any dragon Evan had ever seen. Their scales shimmered like metal, and their eyes glowed with authority. The babies huddled closer to Evan, who could feel their small bodies trembling against his legs. He realized that the beings were here to reclaim the babies. The galaxy did not allow humans to raise dragons alone, and now, Evan had to protect his family. Evan's mind raced. He was only one human, armed with little more than courage and determination. Yet he could see the loyalty in the babies' eyes, the bond they had formed over weeks of care and trust. That bond would be their strength. The attackers moved forward, but Evan noticed something in their behavior: hesitation. The babies' presence, their obvious trust in him, seemed to confuse the visitors. Evan decided to use that moment. He grabbed a small flare from his pack and ignited it, sending a bright red light into the sky. The babies chirped, startled at first, then followed his lead, mimicking his actions by flapping and screeching. The alien dragons froze, uncertain how to respond to this display. Evan realized the creatures were intelligent but not fully understanding the human-dragon bond he had nurtured. He had to show them that the babies chose him, not that he had stolen them. Evan led the babies along a narrow cliff path, moving quickly but carefully. The alien dragons followed, but the terrain was difficult even for them. Evan used his knowledge of the cliffs to evade capture, ducking into hidden caves and slipping between jagged rocks. Glint and Fira flapped and swooped beside him, Morrow clinging to his shoulders, eyes wide with fear but trust intact. They moved like a single team, humans and dragons united against a much larger force. At one point, they reached a small waterfall where the path narrowed dangerously. Evan looked back and saw the alien dragons closing in. He whispered instructions to the babies, pointing to hidden ledges and overhangs. Glint flapped courageously, showing the others the way, while Fira let out a warning screech whenever a pursuer got too close. Morrow, despite being the smallest, used its tail to trip a larger alien dragon that tried to climb the rocks, causing it to stumble. Evan smiled despite the danger. Together, they could outsmart even these powerful beings. Hours passed, and the alien dragons grew frustrated. They tried to communicate with Evan, using roars and gestures, but he could not understand them. Instead, he used simple tricks, leading the babies through narrow passages, across streams, and over hidden ledges where the pursuers could not follow easily. Each successful maneuver gave him hope. He realized that humans had strengths beyond size or power. They had cunning, strategy, and determination. And they had something the alien dragons could not easily match: the trust of the young dragons. As night fell, Evan found a hidden cave deep in the cliffs, large enough for him and the babies but nearly invisible from the outside. He led them inside and blocked the entrance with rocks and branches. Glint, Fira, and Morrow curled around him, exhausted but safe. Evan looked at them and whispered, "We made it, for now." The babies chirped softly, their small warmth and trust comforting him. He knew the alien dragons would not give up, but he also knew that for the first time, the galaxy had witnessed something it had never seen: a human teaching dragons, protecting them, and earning their loyalty. The next morning, Evan realized he needed a plan, not just for survival, but for their future. The galaxy would continue to come, testing the bond he shared with the babies. But he also realized something else: the babies had grown stronger, more confident, and more intelligent. Glint could signal with its wings to warn of danger, Fira could distract pursuers, and Morrow, once timid, now used clever maneuvers to protect the group. Humans could teach, yes, but dragons could also learn quickly from the smallest lessons. Together, they were unstoppable. Evan remembered the first day he had found the babies in the nest, shivering and alone in the storm. Now, weeks later, they were no longer helpless. They had grown into young dragons capable of courage, problem-solving, and teamwork. The alien dragons, powerful though they were, had underestimated the human spirit. Evan realized that the galaxy often judged humans by size and appearance, but it had not yet seen their true strength: the ability to love, protect, and form bonds that could change even the mightiest of creatures. As he watched the night sky, Evan knew the galaxy would not forget this human who stayed with dragons. Some might fear him, some might try to take the babies, but none could erase the trust he had earned. He whispered to the babies, "No matter what comes, we face it together. We stay together." Glint chirped in agreement, Fira let out a small growl, and Morrow rested its tiny head on Evan's chest. They were ready. The alien dragons may have tried to take them, but they had underestimated the strength of a human heart. Evan had taught the babies not just survival, but trust, loyalty, and courage. And now, when the galaxy came again, they would find a bond stronger than power or fear. Together, Evan and the dragon babies would face the universe, and the galaxy would learn that even the smallest human could stand against the mightiest of dragons. Evan smiled faintly in the darkness, feeling the weight of responsibility but also the joy of triumph. They had survived the first test, and the babies had grown stronger because of it. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but for now, he let himself rest, knowing that the galaxy would never underestimate humans again, not when dragons had chosen to stay with one. The morning sun shone over the cliffs, casting golden light on the small clearing where Evan and the dragons had made their home. Glint, Fira, and Morrow stretched their wings, practicing flights that had grown longer, stronger, and more confident with each day. Evan watched them, a smile on his face. They were no longer helpless babies. They were clever, brave, and fiercely loyal. And he realized that their growth was not just their own, it was also a reflection of what humans could teach, even creatures as mighty as dragons. The day began with a quiet training session. Evan led the dragons to a nearby grove where the ground was soft and the trees provided cover. He taught them to hide, to sense danger, and to use their surroundings cleverly. Glint flapped among the trees, learning how to dart silently and observe without being seen. Fira practiced creating distractions, letting out small roars to divert attention when Evan signaled. Morrow, once timid and fearful, now tested simple tricks of their own making, nudging rocks to block paths or using leaves to mask movements. Evan watched carefully, giving encouragement when needed, and realized that teaching was as much about patience as knowledge. As the day passed, visitors from the galaxy appeared again. Ships descended, curious about the human who had dared to stay with dragons. Some came with caution, some with suspicion, and some even with hostility. Yet Evan remained calm. He did not fight with force, he demonstrated care and patience. The dragons followed his example. When one alien dragon approached aggressively, Glint and Fira did not attack blindly. Instead, they hesitated, observing Evan's signals, and withdrew at his direction. Morrow nestled closer to him, trusting his judgment completely. Evan realized that this was the most important lesson he could teach, that strength was not just in claws, fire, or speed, it was in wisdom, trust, and calm action. The alien observers were amazed. They had expected chaos, fear, and rebellion, but instead they saw coordination, respect, and intelligence. A human had guided dragons to act together, to think before reacting, and to value the bond they shared. Even the strongest dragon of the visitors paused, watching carefully, understanding something new. They had underestimated humans. They had not considered that care, patience, and empathy could shape even the most powerful beings. Evan spent the afternoon exploring new ways to teach the dragons. He showed them how to detect weak spots in rocky terrain, how to signal silently with tail flicks and wing beats, and how to cooperate to solve small puzzles he set along the cliffs. The dragons caught on quickly. Glint could now signal Fira to distract an approaching threat while Morrow nudged a boulder to block the path. Evan marveled at their progress. These were not just dragons, they were students, partners, and companions, learning lessons that even the galaxy's most powerful creatures had to admit were remarkable. As the sun began to set, Evan gathered the dragons on a high cliff, overlooking the valleys below. He looked at them, pride and affection swelling in his chest. "You see," he said softly, "you are strong, yes, but strength alone is not enough. Trust, care, and patience, that is what makes you powerful in ways no one can take away." The dragons chirped and growled softly in response, as if understanding every word. They had learned more than flying or fighting. They had learned loyalty, teamwork, and the value of the bonds they had formed with a human. That evening, the galaxy's observers returned one final time. Queen Lysira herself descended from the largest ship, her golden eyes scanning the cliffs and then focusing on Evan. The mother dragon had seen everything, the teaching, the protection, the patience, and the loyalty. For a long moment, she studied the human who had stayed when no one else would. Then she spoke, her voice low and commanding, yet filled with recognition. It was not a threat but an acknowledgement. Humans could teach, could guide, and could influence even dragons. The galaxy had learned something new, something powerful. Evan stood tall, not out of arrogance, but out of calm confidence. He had faced storms, powerful dragons, and entire fleets, and he had done so without fear, only with care and determination. He had taught the dragons to think, to trust, and to act wisely. And in return, he had learned from them, about courage, patience, and loyalty. The galaxy had assumed humans were fragile and weak, but Evan had shown that even a single human could change the course of dragons' lives, and perhaps even the thinking of an entire civilization. Night fell, and the cliffside grew quiet. Evan sat with Glint, Fira, and Morrow curled around him, their small warmth a comforting presence. He whispered softly, "We did it. The galaxy knows now. Humans are not just small creatures. We can teach. We can guide. and we can protect those who need us. The dragons responded with soft chirps, leaning closer as if to affirm his words. Together, they had faced fear, danger, and the unknown, and together, they had won not with force alone, but with trust, care, and courage. The galaxy, watching from afar, had begun to understand. Humans were more than fragile beings, they were capable of teaching lessons no technology, fleet, or dragon could match. And the dragon babies, once tiny and helpless, now soared above the cliffs, gliding confidently through the night air. They had learned from Evan, yes, but they had also chosen him. They had seen his heart, his patience, and his bravery, and they had trusted him completely. Evan looked at the stars above, the vastness of the galaxy stretching endlessly. He knew challenges would come again, but he was no longer just a human alone in the universe. He was a teacher, a protector, and a family to dragons who had once been abandoned. And that bond, built on care, trust, and courage, was stronger than any fleet, any ruler, or any power the galaxy could muster. The night was quiet, except for the soft beating of wings and the low hum of the cliffs. Evan held the babies close, whispering one final promise: we stay together. Always. No matter what the galaxy sends, we face it as one. Glint chirped in agreement, Fira let out a soft roar, and Morrow rested its head against Evan's chest, calm and safe. And in that moment, Evan realized the truth: even dragons, mighty and ancient, could learn from humans. Even the strongest creatures in the galaxy could be guided by patience, trust, and love. And together, humans and dragons had shown the universe that the smallest being could teach the greatest what it truly meant to care. The cliffside was quiet now, but the lessons would echo across the galaxy. Humans could teach, dragons could learn, and bonds of trust could change the course of the stars themselves. Evan, with Glint, Fira, and Morrow at his side, had proven it. And the galaxy would never forget it.